Good evening. I'm President Eileen Natoli, and this is our closed session meeting on Thursday, February 14th. I'm going to take roll. Director Shiras Watt.
Here.
Director Deppie.
Here.
Director Madavi.
Here.
Are there any public comments? There are no public comments, so we will convene to closed session. Thank you. Oh, let's see. I gotta turn this on. Good evening. I'm President Eileen Natoli, and it is February 14th. We are at our regular meeting. I will take roll call. Director Hassai.
Here.
Director Shiras Watt.
Here.
Director Deppie.
Here.
Director Madavi.
Here.
All right. Well, thank you. Are there any public comments?
Yes, good evening. I'm Jim Watt. I'd like to cover a couple of financial issues since on Monday we had a finance meeting and we talked about a few things and some information came to us a little bit late. I didn't have a real chance to look at some of the information, so I'd like to kind of let you people know what I saw, what I think, as well as the audience who may or may not have been at that meeting. Basically what we were doing was we were looking at how we're doing this year with the first 6 months already, actually 7 months now completed, and what we anticipated how we might finish out the year. We were brought that evening a summary of where we thought we would end up the year. And that summary indicated that we could, in all likelihood, have a profit, so to speak, of $353,000. As you probably know, when we set up our budget, maybe you don't know, we anticipated that we would have 10 officers on duty, but for so far this year and probably until this year is completed at the end of June, we only have 7 officers, so not having 3 officers should be saving us a considerable amount of money. But what I really want to talk about here is the fact that we were given this number that indicated by Bill Zanoni, who puts together our financial information, that we should end up with what I call a profit of $353. But since I hadn't seen it until that day, I didn't notice that it didn't include the fact that we had anticipated, we had proposed in our budget that we would have a medical unfunded liability, a medical, we would be setting aside, let's put it that way, we'd be setting aside $250,000 to start to build up the medical obligations that we have for our retirees. And that number was not left in that budget. I hope that it's not being planned by anybody here that $250,000 will not be in the budget. It was agreed that it would be. If it is in the I'm sorry about that. If it is in the budget, then of course the amount of money that we should come up with in terms of a profit, if you will, is about $100,000. So I just want to make that point that I saw after we had that budget meeting. The other thing, though, that I really wanted to cover was and I'm saying all this because we have 2 big cost items coming before us probably in the next month. We have what we are going to be recommended, what is going to be recommended for our police department, how it should be set up, and we will also know probably what the costs of rebuilding this building are. So by the time we talk about these things in a month, we're going to know a great deal more about what some of our really big cost items are. But there's another item that we never seem to talk about, and that's what I really want to talk about this evening, and that is We have an obligation to set aside money for our retirees, for their pensions. And we ended up last year with what we call an unfunded pension liability of $3.7 million. We should have, with CalPERS, about a little over $13 million. We have a little under $10 million that we have been contributing to CalPERS. So we are short $3.7 million. By the way, that number has been going up. If you go back to the year 2011, we had an unfunded liability of not 3.7, but 2.5. And yet the percentage that was unfunded was 74%, and today it's 70, that is funded was 74%, and today it's 72, meaning that we are 28% unfunded. So these numbers keep going up. We've gone for 10 years now without a big correction in the stock market. And as probably most of you know, the money that CalPERS has gets invested. And CalPERS assumes, they are assuming this year that they will receive a 7.2% return on the investments that they hold. And we have approximately $10 million of the money that CalPERS has. They therefore expect that they will get about $720,000 on their investments. That's what they have projected. That's what we are expecting. If they do not make that 7.2%, our unfunded liability increases. As of December, and I know the stock market has had a pretty big increase in January, but CalPERS announced that as of December, their returns on their investments were a negative 3.9%. It should be approaching 7.2 positive. So they are right, as of the end of the year, their returns were running about 11% negative. Think about it this way. If we have $10 million, we were expecting to get a 7% return, but we're getting a negative 11. We're coming in about a little over $1 million short of where we need to be. The 3.6 or 7 that we're unfunded now would quickly rise to 4.7. The last thing I want to point out is that on top of this, CalPERS has very reluctantly started to lower their estimated rate of return. It had been standing at 7.5%. It's now tracking down, as I just told you, it's now at 7.2%, and by next year it will be 7%. But if you go back and if you look at how CalPERS has performed over the last 11 years, you will find that they have performed at a rate of 5.5%. So we all know that CalPERS is playing a few games here. They're probably not going to get their 7% that they've now lowered it to. And if they get down to 7.5%, would you like to know what the unfunded liability, down to 6%, the unfunded liability would rise by another approximately $2.4 million. And our total unfunded liabilities would approach 48% of the amount that we should be having. This is a very scary thing that we could be going into. So I'm just telling you now, I happen to be very concerned. I was very positive last year about what I thought would happen to the market. Didn't turn out that way. I'm very concerned about this year, and I'm very concerned about the year after that. If we go into the kind of recession that we had 10, 11 years ago, CalPERS returns dropped the first year by 5% negative, the second year by 30% negative. I just want to let you know, we're approaching a time here where we could have, as one of our biggest obligations, our obligation to set aside more and more money to pay off our retirees. That's what I wanted to get across. Thank you.
Dean Gillette. I'd like to raise a couple of points that concern me about the transparency of the board and the way it operates. This agenda contains at the end the statement that communications and information submitted by community members and others will be included in the correspondence section of this report and available to the public. Now, and then also says items formerly included in the board packet addendum are now posted separately. I've yet to see where that is on the website. But be that as it may, this is a substantial change from the way that the board has operated in the past. Agendas would be accompanied by an agenda packet, which would have not just the kinds of reports that were financial documents or various things of that sort, but communications between the community and the board members, things that were of interest to other members of the community as to what issues are important and how they're being raised and how they're being discussed. That's no longer available. This was done apparently without discussion. I've not seen anything in the board's minutes, nor explanation as to why it was done. And apparently, it first occurred, as best I know, at the end of December 2018. Prior to that, board agendas included substantial packets of information. A good example of what that looked like was the packet that accompanied yesterday's fire board meeting, which had over 130 documents, pages of documents relating to communications with the fire board and the community. What concerns me is that it appears the board has gone back through all of 2018 and removed all of that information that previously was there, including amending the agendas to include this information, this statement that that correspondence and communication information will be included in a separate section. I don't recall that ever being the case, and I suspect if it is, somebody would have raised it at an earlier date. So I am concerned about the fact the board's not remaking that available, and that it may be going back and amending public documents to change what they previously stated. The final concern I have, or a question that I have, is relating to how these meetings are being recorded. Through the December 2018 meeting, there was a videotape made available. According to the minutes of the online announcement relating to the January 10th, 2019 meeting, the video failed and there's just an audio tape. And the agenda for this meeting says that it will be audio recorded. So my question is there a problem with the video that can be corrected? Is there going to be a correction to it? Are we going to just have audio? And regardless of whether it's audio or video, it's my understanding that the board has hired a transcription service that will transcribe these, particularly the audio tapes. Will those full transcripts of the meetings be made available as opposed to just the minutes? With respect to the concerns I have about not including material in the agenda, if the board feels, based on comments that were made by a board member at the January 10th meeting according to the draft minutes, then I would ask that issue be put on the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you.
Will the general manager reply to this, or will district council say something to that effect?
Well, this was an administrative decision of the general manager, not the board of directors.
Is there requirements that are not being met in regards to letting people of this community know? Oh, I'm so sorry.
We're recording, and so we need a microphone to actually record.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yield the floor.
On topic, are there requirements of this board in regards to letting us as members of this community to be informed in regards to the upcoming and votes at hand or other things that might be necessary for us to attend and maybe put in some input or maybe some encouragement, let's go in that direction, for the board and what they're trying to achieve here in regards to our overall state in regards to liabilities for us as a community, as well as the overall just informational things of what could affect us very much so in this community. I think that would be my overall statement.
By all means. And you should address your correspondence to specific people, and it will get to them.
believe the answer to the question is that we are not in any kind of violation of any requirements for providing information.
And this decision was made when the general manager came on board. It was not in December of 2018, and no minutes have been changed or redacted or altered in any way. The general manager told me that correspondence was to be operated and adapted in this way and not to be part of our agenda packet. And I concurred as board president and deferred, of course, to his decision.
When
So-
did this happen? Because I literally got an email about this while I was on the board saying this was the new policy. When did it happen under your?
Is this on the agenda? If it's not, then I don't think we can't really discuss it.
Okay.
And-
Well,
and
what-
just
my
to explain,
question
let me
would-
explain that
Okay.
these are items that aren't on the agenda.
Okay.
And the public can make
I
comments.
thought it was an open conversation.
No, it's not. That's the thing, is that,
Fantastic. Can we understand how we can all be notified, though? Because I do feel that, so I've been involved with city
excuse me.
governments in
Excuse
regards
me.
to their responsibilities to it. Does this have the same requirement of city governments in
Could-
regards to?
could we-
So as a private entity, we seem to be.
The
we have your-
the microphone is working very well tonight.
Uh-huh.
Could you just lower your voice somewhat?
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's why I tried to speak from there.
Could we have your name, too?
Yes, my name is Michael Rossi.
Does the Brown Act require us or allow us to do that? I'm asking legal.
The Brown Act does not allow us to require the provision of a name in order to speak. However, if the gentleman would like to reply.
Oh, that was asked as a requirement, I
Okay.
felt.
May
I have no trouble with that.
may I mention one thing?
Yes.
We are required, just as cities are, to
Right.
provide notice of what every board member is going to address. That's the agenda that's posted usually 72 hours in advance. But by the same token, we can't talk about things that are not listed on the agenda, which is why there's only very limited back and forth.
And it is again left to the community members to find that information, which I think in our last conversation was that those things are very hard to find. And I, as a community member, am saying that, fantastic, great. And we would encourage people in the community to do so. I'm so sorry. I was told this was just a public agenda aspect. I do want to be a part of this community more so. I would like to be informed as to the things that are happening, as I think everyone here would. And I just find that very hard to achieve. And so just saying that, I think that it's all of our requirements to communicate well with our community in letting them know that these things that are at hand and on the agendas, I would like to make sure that those things are easily accomplished. Thank you very much.
Pat Gillette. So I guess I would like an answer, if the general manager can do so, as to why you decided to eliminate the correspondence from the agenda packets, since that has been a longstanding tradition of this community and continues to be a tradition of the fire board.
Well, it really is a question of the items that were sent, that are addressed to the board members are directed to board members if they're not on the agenda. So all of them receive that. We stopped putting them on the website because I'm really not familiar of any other local government. It's not a common local government practice to put all correspondence on the website. And if you do that, there's some liability risk that correspondence may come in that's, well, we cannot filter correspondence. We have to accept it all. That may be inappropriate. So it's not, the website is not really a social media a place for communicating. But if it's addressed to the board, it goes to each board member. And if it's an item on the agenda, then if we can get it in the agenda packet, we will get it in the agenda packet. And if we miss the deadline, then we'll hand it out at the meeting.
Of course, this is the problem, and I'm not trying to enter into a dialogue, so I'll just make my statement. You've made it so difficult for anyone to correspond with the board and to get their comments heard by the processes that you've put in place. And now we've eliminated the video, and all you can do is go to the audio, and although we have transcripts, we somehow don't get to see the actual copies of the transcripts. Instead, we get summary minutes that no longer detail what goes on. So public comments are filtered and reinvented, and the community has no way of knowing who these people are who come to these meetings, take time out of their schedules to address the board and to address the community in general about concerns that we have. We are a small community with a history of open dialogue, and I know you aren't part of our community, Tony, so maybe you don't understand that. But we are not like every other community. So judging us by what other communities do that is in a way that is not consistent with our history seems inappropriate, especially since it was done in the dark of night without telling anyone about it. So I object to that as a member of this community for 40-plus years. I echo Dane's comments and concerns that for the past 2 years, this board has been chipping away at one of the fundamental values of our community, which is meaningful community input into the board's deliberations on issues that are central to our safety and well-being. Taking away every avenue of community input and discussion, as this board has done and is doing, fuels discontent and suspicion and is inconsistent with who we are. As a 40-plus year citizen of this community, I'm disappointed and distressed by the lack of transparency and the appearance of secret agendas and result-oriented behaviors that seem to define this board. But I'm here to raise another issue, actually, and that's the question of the board's plan for finding a permanent chief of police. When I posed this question in correspondence to the board's president, writing a letter as you're telling me that I should do, which of course no one knows about because it's not attached to the agenda because it wasn't agendized, even though I asked for it to be agendized, the board president responded by saying she could not discuss this because it's a, quote, personnel matter. Now, I've been an employment lawyer for 42 years, and I can't think of a single law or argument to support that statement. And when I asked the president for her legal reason for that, I got, of course, no response. Let me be clear. I'm not asking whether any current officer will be considered for the position or for an evaluation of the current interim chief of police. I'm asking as a member of this community for information from this board as to its game plan for replacing the chief of police, a position that has been vacant for over 2 years. Now, maybe your plan is to not ever replace the chief of police. Maybe it's to wait until the matrix study is completed. Maybe it's to keep an interim chief of police forever. Whatever the answer is, there is no question that good governance, which I would really like to see this board try to implement, as well as good management, mandates that there be a plan in place and shared with the community and the public that you serve. As one of the members of your board knows, because she was an integral part of this, the last time we had a vacancy in the chief of police, Rochelle was involved in trying to help this community decide who would replace our chief of police. And as I'm sure she will recall, our board was completely transparent in that process, from allowing the public to know the timetable, as well as the qualifications we were looking for, and we allowed the public to meet and interview candidates. But this board has chosen to keep our community in the dark for 2 years now by simply renewing the ICOP's contract every 6 months or so. It's time for a disclosure of the strategy and the plan for the chief of police position in our community. And it's time for you to seek community input as to that strategy and plan. Now, I know you're not going to respond to this comment because, oh, God forbid that you enter into a dialogue with the citizens of Kensington. So I again ask, as I did previously, twice in my letter to the board president, to which I got no response, that this item be placed on the agenda for discussion so that we can understand the thinking of the board and the plans for filling this important vacancy in our community. I'm going to give a copy of this, and I'm going to ask that it be attached to the minutes. Just in case it isn't, I read it so that the people of Kensington who take the time to listen to the audio will know that at least one citizen here is asking this board to be transparent about what it's doing.
Just one second. I will make a correction. I was on the 2015 search for a new police chief. And during that time, every officer who responded told us how unusual and uncomfortable it made them to have to go through a public process. We informed them that unfortunately we felt the need to do so because the public trust from Reno had been so devastating that we felt that our community could not move forward. We lost some candidates because of the openness of our process. So it was not something that I cared to repeat again, even though I understood the necessity at the time.
We have spent 30 minutes on public comments right now. I think we need to start moving, if you could just make a
Mine will
short
be
comment
very
on the
quick.
video. Yeah.
Mine will be very quick. My name is David Bergen, and one of the things I do is do some tech support for the board, including the audio and the video. We do try to video every meeting in this room, because up there is the camera. It's a fixed camera. When the board meets in the back room there, then we can only have the audio, because there's no camera in there. We have had problems with the system. The unit that does the recording has failed a few times, and I'm working with our vendor right now to get it fixed permanently. So I just wanted to make that plain. So you know, we do videos whenever we can. Thank you very much.
Actually, is it allowed for non-staff to be doing those things?
I wanted to say, we do these things daily, to 50 meetings on an event, and it's a very achievable thing. I'm sorry, our public is
Hello, Lisa Corona. I just want to speak to the issue of correspondence being included in the packets as part of communication. I think there's 2 points that I want to bring up. First, in the interest of the public participation on agenda items and non-agenda items, it's a way for people to provide input who may not want to come out on a rainy night to a meeting or have other ways of communicating. And by putting it in the packet, the entire board gets to see that comment, which may inform some of their decision-making, and the community as well. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that occasionally, having worked in another city for 15 years and having communications always included in the packets, there were many times that a board member would want to refer a particular communication or put that on a future agenda item. Either refer it to the manager, refer it to another staff person for response, just as a way to be responsive to some of the community interests. So I think there are multiple reasons for including those communications and advantages for the community as well as the board. So.
Good evening, all. My name is Peter Liddell. For Tony and the board, you may remember a while back you approved the local hazard mitigation plan, and thank you for that. But recently, this week, I got a note from the county OES that they hadn't received it. Can you tell me maybe what happened to it and when we are planning to submit it to them?
I'm working with the district administrator to resolve that. We should have it pretty quickly.
Okay, because it's not in effect until
We
OES
want to
receives it.
expedite that.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Vita Doro. I want to know how many people got this agenda if they didn't print it at home. We used to have a table back there where at least we had they're up here, I apologize. So this, at least this one piece of paper is made free to us. Okay, thank you.
I think there's only a few left.
We'll have one more comment, and then we'll close public comments. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Andrew Gutierrez.
Okay.
I've been attending these meetings for about 25 years, and it's been a different herd of cats that have been on opposite sides. It hasn't been transparent, as has been alluded. It's been all kinds of things. In the scientific world, we use keywords. And the thing that characterizes Kensington's KPPCSD meetings are things like, we don't know about Renos, we don't know about writ suits, we don't know about lawsuits, we don't know about a whole bunch of things that as citizens we would like to know. So I want to compliment the board, at least having a plan moving forward to try to solve the ongoing problem of getting a stable, honest, efficient police in this city, in this town, in this burg. About 20 years ago, I kept saying that there was a conflict of interest between one person having both the position of being general manager and chief of police. We finally have a general manager and we have an interim chief of police. Those functions are now separated. That conflict of interest has disappeared. And Mr. Constantoris should be complimented for the able advice that he has been giving us. So I find it disingenuous that a lot of people are talking about transparency or lack of it, when in fact it has been a history of this burg for an awful long time. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on to board and staff comments. Tony, would you like to address your report?
Yes, sir. So, the general manager's report, several items on the report this month. The first one is the police study that Matrix is doing. And we have scheduled 2 public meetings, one on a Thursday and one on a Saturday. Thursday, February 28th at 7:30 p.m., which is the same time as the next board meeting would be scheduled. But in lieu of a board meeting, we're having a community meeting. And then the same community meeting the following Saturday on March 2nd at 10 a.m. The last time we did community meetings, there were some people that couldn't attend the Saturday meetings, and a number of people thought they worked out really well, so we ended up coming up with an idea to do it 2 times so we can reach as many citizens as possible. And the presentations will be by Matrix. They have completed their Phase 2 report. The Phase 2 draft report and the Phase 1 report that they completed are both on the website. And the Phase 2 has actually got the some dollar figures in terms of the costs of the options. And they'll be discussing these at these meetings. The first few community meetings are more for public input, entirely public comment of what kind of police department that you want. They took this information and prepared the report. So now they're presenting the report to the public, and it's they are considered one of the nation's top police study organizations. I think they've done at least 100, I think possibly 200 studies in the country. So it's an important part of the process. And I think if we haven't been clear, I apologize, but we are not going to select a permanent chief until this process has been completed. Because if we are not keeping the current department as is, then even if we recruited, no one would apply because we would be contracting or looking at some other alternative that Matrix might be proposing and the board approving. If we are keeping our own department, then yes, we would proceed with a recruitment for the police chief. So we have to do things in the right order. After these community meetings, we hope to present this information to the board and then the board will decide on the next steps in the process. And we hope to present them as early as March. So if we can do it by March, that would be excellent. So we have a pretty good rapid time frame here to complete this study and get it behind us and address the future of the police department. So I would encourage the residents to attend these meetings. They're going to be repeats, so you don't have to go to both of them. And we're trying to get the word out to everybody so they're well publicized.
How are you doing?
We have a newsletter. We've got it on our website. It's the Kensington, what's it called? Kensington Outlook. And in my report. And I'm sorry? And next door. So we've had pretty good attendance in the first two meetings, and that's what we'd like to see at this meeting, the same type of attendance. Sure, and we'd like to see you there. With no maybes. The next item I had on my list is the board priorities. The board had a meeting on the 1st. This was just a workshop type meeting, just a discussion. And we focused at that meeting on really 4 areas, and I think they're pretty significant. The first one, of course, is the matrix study that I just talked about. The second one, which really the goal of that study is to address the concerns in the police department and have a plan for the future, but it's in the very near future. This is not something years away, it's months away. The administrative reorganization, where we stand with that, and what process is being used to move forward on that part of it. The policy and procedures manual, which is out of date, and we have a process currently underway to update the policy and procedures manual and the next year's budget. In terms of the policy and procedures manual, we've been trying to update it. We've been working on it for several months, probably about 6 months, and we're targeting to do this in March, to have a draft that's readable and presentable available in March. And we hope we can accomplish it by that date. So that will be the first time the public will see it and have an opportunity to comment on it and review it. And I know this is something that's gone on many years in the past, and we've turned a corner on this and actually might have an updated manual available.
Can I ask if that...
You can talk to me after the meeting if you like. Sure. The Board President Natoli and I met with 2 of the neighboring police departments just to talk about common issues and how we can work better together. I usually, when I meet with departments like that, especially on a first time, I meet without an agenda. It's just a chance to get to know each other and know what we look like and how to work better together. And I thought we had positive meetings with both of the chiefs in Albany and in El Cerrito. I'd like to meet with more of the chiefs. Those are the primary ones we work with, so that really...
I should correct you. We also work heavily with Berkeley.
I'd like to meet with the Berkeley Police Department too. They're a little harder to arrange meetings, but we should meet with them also. In these meetings, we talked about police officer recruitment, which has risen to almost a national issue. Departments nationally are having difficulty recruiting police officers, and everyone's trying to their studies on it and trying to understand why. There just seems to be a change in the trend where 15, 20 years ago, there was a number of young people entering the police service, Today, that is not taking place. The millennials of the current generation are not interested in police work. And I think the national incidents that have occurred where some young people have been shot, and there have been incidents that have gotten quite a bit of national attention, have cast a negative impact on recruitment for police officers. When we met with Albany, they said they were down 5 officers. They have 26 approved, and they are currently at 21 and struggling to keep it at 21 as we understand it. They indicated that they, as a smaller city, compete with larger departments because larger departments have more to offer recruits, such as SWAT, undercover work, and the bomb squad, which smaller organizations do not have these to attract applicants. But then you turn around and look at San Jose, which is a major department, and they're down 30% in their police department, which is unbelievable. In my career, I've never seen recruitment so difficult for the police service. So of course that impacts us because we're small, and we don't have these other additional services to offer. I think part of the answer to that, but this is kind of my own philosophy, is that we should be working together with departments instead of competing with departments. That was one of my motives in meeting with our neighboring cities, to see if we can work better with us and try to work as a team rather than as competitors. And then finally, the last item on my report is the budget, which we have commenced the process. We have a calendar, and I think the Finance Committee have reviewed the calendar earlier this week. The budget was significantly changed last year. We included accomplishments, we included objectives, we had charts, and the most important part of it was that there was a 5-year financial forecast, which was never included in previous years. So we're going to continue building on those elements and improve the budget again this year, step by step. And we should have the budget approved by June, if not by May. I think we'd like to do it even a little earlier this year, if we can. So, Madam President, that concludes my report.
I have some questions, actually, about your report. You say one of the topics was recruiting. What were the other topics? Because it sounds like you talked on multiple things, and you have not informed the rest of the board about this, but it seems you took the president with you, so she knows more information than the rest of us.
Well, we just talked about how we can work together better. We talked about if there are any current issues that are common. We just talked about our backgrounds, how we got into the positions we had, and
we also talked with El Cerrito about, they have 3 non-sworn community service workers. I forget what they call them. Do they call them CSWs? They have some acronym for them.
The CSOs.
CSOs, yeah. Okay, community service officers. And it was an interesting concept in light of the problems of recruiting for police. What can we do besides having officers for certain tasks? And of course, those are, El Cerrito is a much larger city, and so they do a lot of the parking enforcement, vacation checks, and other things. And it's a way to kind of stretch your dollar, so to speak.
So are you saying this report is incomplete in what you're informing us about?
No.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you talked about things that are not here, and I did send you an email on Monday, which was very visibly marked as saying I need some information for preparing for this board meeting, and one of those items was that I requested that you provide the full board, since we all deal with police matters, not just the president, about what was going on in those meetings in detail.
Well, these were just informal meetings. There was no agenda. There was just various topics that we discussed, and we introduced ourselves. And I have meetings like this all the time This is not one-time meeting. I have them, as often as I can to meet peers and coworkers and others in other cities to build better relations. That's all there was.
These are just rapport-building exercises, and you as a board member are certainly welcome to call the chief of police and schedule a meeting. They're very affable. I've met with fire chief before. I've met with Chief Greenwood of Berkeley. You're welcome to do that and to try and establish relationship, or with other board members for other cities. It's kind of just general sharing of information. You're not discussing anything that is an issue. You're finding out where they are, as the general manager has done.
There's no decisions that were made, no commitments, no agreements. There were just general discussions. It's like a cup of coffee with the chief.
Well, you characterize these as sort of fact-finding too, so I think we are all...
I'm sorry, as what?
You sort of characterize it, you just want to go get to know things from them, rapport build, but I do think it's important that if we are supposed to all make and understand, since we work with El Cerrito, Albany, and Berkeley, which I'm kind of confused as why there's no mention of you guys planning to meet with them.
Because Berkeley is overwhelmed. They are short of officers, and they made it very clear to the ad hoc that they were not interested in...
Wait, did you just say you went to meet with them because of who you could contract out with?
No, you asked why we didn't meet with Berkeley. We did not meet with Berkeley because Berkeley is overwhelmed. They have shortages in dispatch, they have shortages of officers, and we did talk to Albany 2 years ago with dispatch, and that's with Andy Greenwood, and he just said he was overwhelmed. So. Excuse me. Yeah.
No, this is a business meeting. Sorry, I would defer to the madam.
Wait, so but you're saying the rationale you not meet Berkeley is because they do not have staff or stuff, but the thing is we work with them. We have mutual aid agreements with Berkeley. We sometimes have authorization to patrol their land.
Officer Hall, could you please address the mutual aid that we have with Berkeley?
Well, this is part of really the GM's report. It isn't getting into the specifics. These are just informal, casual meetings, and we should meet with Berkeley. They haven't returned my calls, actually. They probably keep a busy schedule, but we're going to continue pursuing Berkeley and possibly Richmond, too. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
He said they didn't return your calls.
Yeah.
So let's just continue.
Folks, please, we have a process here. This is not new. Everybody understands, okay? If you are going to make a comment at an appropriate time to make a comment, please use the microphone. Sir, come to a few meetings and see how the process works, and you'll get it, okay? We're not trying to shut things down, but this is a business meeting for us to get through some business. And unfortunately, I think there's really not a lot here. It's getting very contentious over what seems to be very routine. Well, I'll be quiet now and let the general manager continue speaking, but please, I'm asking for folks not to speak out of turn, not to, this is not a dialogue, in fact, it's not. It is a business meeting. The time for public comment is clearly specified for all matters, but before an agenda item and during an agenda item. So I would prefer that you do not interrupt the meeting. Thank you.
So sorry. There have been several of us who have raised with...
I don't know if the general manager or the board comments with...
Yes, I mean,
addressing this.
I would object to public comment at this time.
We're not having public comments right now. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Well, these are just routine meetings to get to know the other departments. I didn't realize they would be so controversial.
Which is great, frankly.
Okay.
Sir.
Please stop. it is not time for public comment, and I want to move on to the Chief of Police's report, please.
How do I ask a question, Eileen, that really is related to what Tony has reported and the matrix report itself? How do I do that? Just tell me how to do that.
Well, it's acceptable to me if you want to raise that, ask a quick question here.
So in reading the matrix, okay, in reading, and I'm Johanna Furman, in reading the matrix reports, and I've gone over all of them, in no case was there a discussion around using alternates to the police. There are several of us who've had conversations with a number of you, and I'm very encouraged. I think we're really encouraged to hear that you have been gathering information. It's a useful thing. And yet, we are now about to have the matrix reports come in, and I think many of us would like to make sure that this framework and this larger thinking out of the box about how we can staff and resource our police is really being taken into account. So how do you propose to do that so that we don't have the report presented to us as a fait accompli?
There is no fait accompli. This is just the results of their study. Come to the meetings.
I have been.
It's coming in meetings.
Yeah, I certainly will.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be up to the board to digest their findings and then discuss and then make a decision. Matrix isn't telling us the decisions that we have to make.
I like to point out the board serves the public. We don't make our own decisions. We also digest the public's comments too.
Very good. Thank you, by the way.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments as to what is going on in the police department right now. The first thing I want to just make a quick announcement that the Police Officers Association has chosen a recipient for the Officer of the Year Award that's celebrated by Elks Lodge number 1251. They're gonna throw an officer appreciation dinner for that individual, which is Officer Amit Nath, on the 27th of February of this month. The second thing, I just want to make a quick comment as to, I am currently working in conjunction with the El Cerrito Police Department Chief and the Kensington Fire Department personnel. We're working together to establish some evacuation routes in case of a multi-casualty incident or a natural disaster. The thought process behind this is we're going to try to get some, establish an egress route to get people out of Kensington. So we're looking at some of the main veins. So what we're going to do is, with the resources that we have, we can place officers in certain areas that are already established to ensure the free flow of traffic. So that way we can kind of stop, mitigate some of the bottleneck that will occur. We're in the beginning stages of this. Sometime in the fall, there's probably going to be an exercise so that we can sit down and see what traffic's really going to do as opposed to what we're going to try to expect it to do. So this is currently in the works. What I would also like to see are the Kensington paths added to that, just in case there's foot traffic that's also trying to get out. One of the major aspects to this is you're going to have to sign up with the county warning system. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that, but if you Google Contra Costa County warning system, it will come up and there will be a tab that you can click on that will allow you to sign up. So the process is going to work where the county you will get phone calls either on your hard line or cell phone, depending on how you sign up, and they will tell you which way to go. Hopefully, you will see uniformed officers on those routes if you decide to take the routes that we establish. if you're familiar with the area and you know where you want to go and you know other routes that may be less congested, by all means. So that's currently in the works right now, so.
I just want to mention, we spoke last year several times about the Contra Costa County warning system, and I believe the link is on our website. It appeared in our agendas several times about how to sign up, but also sign up for Nixle.
Also, are we going to get an update on recruiting? And also, I was wondering if you could speak to the general manager's comment that our recruiting efforts might be being stymied by the fact we don't even know what we're doing with our police department.
That's my third and last point.
Oh, awesome.
No, please, no.
All right, let me just speak real quick on the recruiting. Let me give some reality for the Kensington experience for everything that's being discussed nationally and statewide and locally. To date, since December of 2016, we've had 9 applications, okay? We've had 9 applications. There have been 1 successful hire, okay? We currently have 7 people of the 10 slots on staff now. Right now, I have 2 applicants in background. Hypothetically, if both of those applicants are successful, we'll be at 90% capacity for staffing. Our recruiting efforts have been multifaceted. We went down to the police academy that had a graduating academy, and we approached all the unaffiliated officers. We've had no interest coming from those individuals. We've been on several websites. We've been on at least 4 or 5 of them. And what I'm learning from that is we get a flood of applications, but they have nothing to do with law enforcement. We're getting chefs, babysitters, electrical technicians, from as far as away as Boston all the way to Hawaii. So to drill down on what's actually happening here, we are actually ahead of the game. As I attend the county chiefs meetings, I'm only aware of 1 police department in Contra Costa County that's at full capacity, and that's San Pablo. And if we are successful with the 2 applicants that we currently have, we'll be at 90% capacity. So we are far ahead of the game.
I actually had a question. So what's the status of our reserves at the moment, like our reserve officers?
We currently have no reserve officers right now. It's more of an immediate need to get full-time officers. If we have a reserve officer, they're only required to work 20 hours a month, and they're unpaid. It wouldn't be fair for us to ask for them to work a full shift so that we can cover some of the 3 blank open positions that we have. So the immediate goal right now is to find qualified applicants. As I've said, we've had 9, and out of the 9, only 1 has been hired because.
Are these all cadets, or are any of them from like older laterals or like reaccreditation?
These are officers with prior experience who have their post certificate in hand. Their post certificates are valid. So they come with us with the experience that will enable them to thrive at an earlier moment than we would have had someone fresh out of the academy.
I'm happy, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 7 on the.
May I make a board comment?
Sure.
I want to comment and raise a formal concern about the newsletter that's being prepared, or I don't know what it is at the stage, but I want to raise that it contains demonstrably false information.
Just one moment. I think that this is not, it's a work product, and I think that it's.
How is it a work product? It's a public document.
It's not yet a public document. Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
It's on the website.
Okay, then it is.
public
Then I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought it was still in process.
Wait, it's on the website? Oh my God. You do realize that how we talk about our CalPERS amortization is incorrect? We're not on the 15-year plan, we're on the 30-year plan. We agreed to voluntarily try to do the 15-year plan, yet we're obliged to a 30-year plan. So I don't know why we're saying in that we are on the 15. Also, you do not include in any way a direct link or even inform in any obvious way that the reports are on the website for people to read the source material themselves. How are you supposed to inform people if they can't even go back to the primary information? And then, like, literally, I was reading about the CSDA's best practices, and they're very much like staff needs to write this, needs to be ultra neutral, you need to be very factual, because you open up your risk to litigation if you are viewed as using public money to essentially do grassroots supporting or lobbying. I'm like, whatever. I'm just lodging my formal concern because you are essentially risking potentially misinforming the town, and you're essentially opening us all up to extra litigation that we do not need.
I'm sorry, but I don't think that you should, it was written by Matrix, so.
Well, then why?
So that, it was written.
Wait, is it? Then why isn't it assigned, why isn't it?
It's an executive summary of what happened, so.
Wait, so you're saying we paid over
Pardon me,
50,000 or
this item isn't on the agenda. I'm sorry to interrupt Director Mondavi, but you know, if you want us to give you notice of what's going to be discussed at a board meeting.
Oh, that's a website. It's a website, www.kppcsd.org. It's a website, and if there's technical problems, we'll certainly help you.
I just want to add one final point that, you know, we are violating our due diligence if we essentially publish something that we knowingly know is false. They claim, the Matrix claims, supposedly that's the author now, sorry. They are claiming on that report that we are on the 15 years CalPERS amortization, and it costs X, Y, and Z. But however, actually we are officially on the 30-year amortization. We have only voluntarily agreed to try Mr. Watt's idea of paying forward what extra money we have. So we are not obliged to 15 years, yet they are apparently claiming we are. They use language that is very leading, like essentially, or there are about this equivalently the same without giving quantitative data, and they make statements that they don't even back up with any sort of citation or model. So at what point is this appropriate for us to be publishing this stuff under the header of our government, of this special district?
Did you ever hear of raising that in the committee?
I didn't even know about it. They just sent me an email. They just sent me an email saying, this is on the...
All right, please, this is a...
She didn't even know. She did not, in our transcripts, she did not know that this was a public event.
Please.
Yes, I knew that Matrix wrote it.
All right, we cannot...
Why would you?
Don't attribute them.
Conduct a meeting with everyone shouting. Please stop.
There is appropriate times at all the agenda items for public comment.
Okay, yeah.
So then it's not appropriate,
I'm
is
so
it?
sorry. I have a really sick child at home, and this is really entertaining. But I'd like to go ahead and give my piece and leave.
I move we let her do that.
By really sick, I just mean she has the flu. This is not.
This is item 8, and this is Meredith Gerhardt from the Office of Sheriff and...
If it pleases the board.
Emergency Services, so thank you.
May I
All good?
suggest that you reserve to the public the right to comment, though, on the chief's report? There was one member who wanted to make a comment.
Is this kosher? Hi, I'm Meredith. I met some of you all last night. Thank you so much for having me. This is far more entertaining than watching Patton with my husband for the 15th time. I appreciate you having me.
We do our best.
I would like to say, just as a note, that I've lived in places that were not democratic, and this is a privilege, and it's something that we should take a minute and enjoy. I was in Zimbabwe when Mugabe was still in power, and this type of thing shouldn't be taken for granted. So just take a minute and enjoy yourselves. Okay? I am the emergency planning coordinator for West End, Contra Costa County. So I've got 5 cities and 11 unincorporated areas. Kensington is certainly the most vocal and engaged. You all deserve credit, again, for that. I wanted to give a quick update on the emergency planning priorities that we're focusing on for 2019. None of them are particularly interesting or groundbreaking. We're continuing to focus on regular emergency preparedness. We are developing a set of emergency evacuation planning guidelines that we're going to roll out, hopefully in the next month or 2. These are guidelines that you can use in the development of your own unincorporated or incorporated evacuation plans. We're continuing to engage with the disability access and functional needs community because we know that they have a particular vulnerability in disasters. What else are we doing? We have a new county EOC opening in about 10 months. It's going to house a lot more people, and we're continuing to focus on exercises. We exercised a flood scenario today where we wiped out Bethel Island. In a few months, we're going to blow up Bay Point. EOC, Emergency Operations Center. So my office, the county's office, is a coordinating agency for all the incorporated and unincorporated special districts, faith-based group, community organizations. Everyone who comes together in our county is considered part of our operational area. And our operational area is one of the operational areas that make up the coastal region for Cal OES, California Office of Emergency Services. So I really just wanted to introduce myself. I'm not sure how this works. Do I answer questions? Do I run for cover?
Run for cover.
I have a question.
Does anyone have any questions?
I actually have a question. I wasn't sure if I heard your second point about, talk about people with special needs.
Disabilities and access and functional needs is the state term.
And can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's something I know I and others are concerned about. In particular, if you have any examples of how communities can track people with those kinds of needs, certainly disabilities or just elderly, that changes quite a bit. You know, someone may be ill, laid up with a broken leg, and then someone who may have been healthy a year later is not so healthy. So do you have any examples of how those systems work and who tracks them?
So it's a hot button topic. The state guidelines on keeping track of people with disabilities and access and functional needs are that we don't do it. We don't like registries. We take our guidance from the state and from the 3 disability access and functional needs coordinators who represent those communities in our EOC. On the face of it, it seems like it would be a great idea to keep track of where everyone who needs assistance lives in the event of a disaster. In reality, it enters us into a tacit contract with people who understand then that in an emergency they will be rescued first and quickly. And as recently as Hurricane Harvey, we know that that doesn't happen. We know that registries are vulnerable to misuse. We have data hacked on a regular basis from much larger and more secure organizations. We also know that registries are inherently incomplete and inadequate. The state definition for people with disabilities or who have access and functional needs includes groups like pregnant women who don't self-identify as having a disability or an access and functional need. It includes people who have language limitations, mobility issues, things that would provide a barrier to them receiving information, or who might not understand a risk or a threat. So the things that do work, the things that we are doing, are working with community-based organizations who do have access to lists and do keep track of people that they serve. So for example, we had a recent fire in the Marsh Creek area of Clayton, and we relied on a community group called Mobility Matters that provides transportation services for people who are semi-mobile, but these are the type of people who couldn't get out of their garage in Santa Rosa. So people who have some mobility but are not capable of driving themselves and are likely to be stuck or left behind in a fire. And we asked them to reach out to the people in that community that we knew, they knew where they lived. We try and leverage the information we have, and we encourage and beat home the point that the best thing we can do as a community is to know our neighbors. There are communities all over the United States that have set up things like buddy systems. It's not enough to be able to take care of yourself. You need to know who on your street is going to have difficulty receiving messages, who might not be signed up for the community warning system, and I have some information sheets here. So who might not be signed up and who might have trouble getting the information in an event that requires you to evacuate. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And for Kensington, do you know what some of those, I mean, I'm totally agreeing with you on the neighbor issue. That's what I think is really the first line of defense. But are there particular groups that you know, like this Mobility Matters, that serve Kensington?
There are a number of disability access and functional needs groups that serve West End and that serve, for example, developmentally disabled adults all over the county. Kensington specific, no.
No, so they're part of the county system is what I really guess.
Some of them have different geographic limitations, but we do know of those areas.
Thank you. This was very helpful because this was an issue that I was concerned about, and I also wondered about this ability to have a registry, how that could work, how difficult that would be. You've answered my question very well.
I think with respect to registries, there is always an understanding and a compulsion to do better. And if we ever came up with a better solution or a way to make them safer and more coherent, and to have some sort of understanding with people who register for them, that they still need to be accountable for their own preparedness and evacuation. So it's not something that I think is an absolutely binary issue. But we need to take our lead from the state and from those who are representing those groups in our county, and they're saying absolutely not at this point in time. Is everyone in this room registered for the community warning system?
Yes.
Nixle is great, but it fails. Yes.
All right, are there any other questions?
I have a quick question. Are there any websites or resources that you'd recommend right now for community members to get informed, have a plan, or make a kit?
FEMAReady.gov and Red Cross. So if you Google emergency preparedness kit or emergency preparedness plan, you'll be overwhelmed quickly. There's a lot of different people selling a lot of different products. In the end, what I've found to be true, and what I hope resonates with you all, is that you know what you're going to need. You keep as much food as the days you want to eat for. You keep as much water as you plan on going through every day. If you plan on being stuck for 3 days, then keep 3 days worth of water. I have 5 days worth of water in my garage for every member of my household. I know that my kids are going to need entertaining, and so I've prioritized toys and snacks in my emergency kit. You all know what you need, so when you go through these lists, it can't be checking off the boxes that someone has arbitrarily decided you probably will need in the event of a disaster. It's meant to be a queue. Please. Hey, it's nice to meet you. We've spoken.
I need to put you on the spot here. Just a real quick question. A while
I'm
back.
actually not sworn. I'm not a sheriff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They won't give me a gun. I keep asking.
A few months back, there was some discussion in town about evacuations, who initiates them and how that process works. Is it possible you can speak briefly to that?
Of course. Thank you. So evacuation statewide is again, a hot button issue. It's a topic that's difficult to talk about because it requires a level of interagency coordination that most groups don't do well. I was part of the search and recovery response up in Butte recently, and we had a unified law, fire, search and rescue, National Guard command. And these are professional groups that don't know how to play together. So it's not a surprise that on a small local scale, it's a challenge for law, fire, residents, and the community warning system to all get on board. So the way an evacuation works, according to state law and common sense, is in the event of a fire, for example, fire would recommend to law enforcement that they evacuate people in a certain area. Fire can't implement an evacuation. Law has legal authority to implement an evacuation. They can move people out of harm's way. Law doesn't have the means to implement an evacuation, so they would need the community warning system to communicate that information to the community. You can see the challenge in getting these three agencies to coordinate practice together. And then even if they've coordinated and practiced perfectly, if the community hasn't been made aware of these plans and doesn't know what to do when they receive that message, it's kind of all for naught. So it's a massive coordinated effort. And if I could say one thing to Kensington, it would be this is probably the most intelligent community in the county and the most balkanized. And your inability to work together, to meet together with law and fire is going to stymie whatever evacuation plans you try and put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go to old business, or are you going to?
Thank you. I'll keep this real brief. Thanks to Chief Hull for taking the initiative to start discussions about evacuation planning. This was a topic at last evening's fire board meeting. I made a similar comment at that meeting. I'd like to make the same suggestion to this board. Obviously, the paths in Kensington are a potentially valuable resource for evacuation, especially in a situation where vehicular traffic is impeded or impossible. It may be the only way that some people can get out of harm's way and to a safer place. Dealing with the paths has been a thorny issue because of the legal uncertainty about who owns them. And I know a lot of people have been looking for a path forward on that. I'd like to suggest, I suggested last night to the fire board, and I'd like to suggest to this board that you come together to investigate the possibility of entering into a joint powers agreement between the two districts. This is nothing mysterious. It's done all the time in state and municipal government. There are many examples of fire protection districts and community service districts entering into agreements to jointly exercise a power that they share in common. Both of our districts clearly have the ability to acquire, own, and manage real estate because they both do, and it's in the government code. So this is a very flexible way to enter into an agreement to work jointly and potentially to jointly try to solve the problem of who owns those paths and then who will take responsibility for maintaining them and improving them both for enjoyment but importantly for evacuation. Thank you.
Thank you. I will tell you, my thought is that the county should be part of this too, because the county had the authority to develop Kensington, and they didn't require the developer to really make them be durable, and now they're in limbo. Supervisor Joya is very happy to express his support of the paths, and when you say, great, what financial support will you help us with? And it's, oh, he doesn't mean that. So I think the county has a large responsibility in with this too. So, okay, great, thank you. I want to move along and go to old business, and that's just a real quick item.
Madam President, I think we didn't do item 7A on the consent calendar.
Right, I'm going to get back to that, but I wanted to just get to the, some of the other issues, because I know there's some people waiting on this. In short, we had several bids that we looked at. We chose Elite in the fall because they were the lowest bidder, and they removed some dead and dying trees in the park. They've also done some acacia removal as well in the park. And a tree happened to fall down in January in the park near the annex, and that was removed as well. Moving on to new business.
Wait, is this the one about tree limb and removal in the park?
Yes?
I had a question about the contract, actually.
Oh, sure.
I was going through it because I was just trying to understand what it is, and there's this part where we cross out 26,150 and replace it with 31,100. And when I remember voting on this at December, it was like around, like they printed it out. It was, the bid options were Elite at 24,350 and Ponderosa at 31,000. So I'm sort of curious, is this normal that we cross out contracts and change sums based on what we voted on?
Well, we had some bids, Cyrus, that I didn't understand at the time that they had to be prevailing wages, and then we got both Ponderosa and Elite to come in with prevailing wages, and Elite was less expensive.
Yes, but I'm talking about the contract we signed, that there's this weird part that's crossed out, and it's been increased.
Can I see it, please? Oh, that might have been because of the emergency work. That was it.
So do we stuff that into the same contract? Should not have been a separate item?
Well, two points. One is it was an emergency item of work that we added on, so we did not want to wait for the board to reconvene. There was no need to wait, both because the additional sum was within the manager's contract authority and because it's generally recognized that in the case of emergency that could be dangerous to life or property.
Oh, yes, definitely. I don't disregard the fast emergency reaction. I'm wondering why it is why it had to go into this contract, why it couldn't be a separate billing item. Because, I mean, this sets a precedent where we can essentially vote on something that's $0, and then suddenly lo and behold, finally voted on something that ended up with $41,000 spent because of an emergency.
Well, it was because we voted on the work that was in the park, and the add-on was just the emergency work that was done on the vacant lot. So the vote was proper for the park. It was over the general manager's authority, but he has authority to enter into a contract at less than.
Yes, but wouldn't that be a separate contract, is what I'm asking.
It doesn't have to be. It could just be an addendum, an add-on item. It's expanded. If you look at the exhibits, which should be there, there are two descriptions of work. One is the priority item, and that represents the new money.
I'm just saying this is not something we should get in the habit of doing.
It was an emergency. It is not something we're in the habit of doing.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to move on to new business. And we have board committees. I was waiting for the policy and procedure manual to come out. It's taking longer than we would like. There are 3 committees in the current manual: emergency preparedness, solid waste, and finance. I've asked Director Hassai to head up emergency preparedness. I'm going to continue with solid waste, and then as board president, I'll be on finance. There are coordinators in the policy and procedure manual. Because I'm on finance, I'm going to do finance and administration. Director Deppie will be intergovernmental external issues. He's our LAFCO representative. Director Deppie will be on park planning and recreation and responsible for park maintenance and coordinating with KCC. Director Hassai will be the coordinator for community outreach. Director Madavi will be the coordinator for park funding and coordinating fundraising programs for the park. Director Shara-Swat will be the coordinator for district policy and procedure and also for the public safety building. So-
Actually, this is for mostly Deputy's own personal thing. When you say responsibility, what does that mean? Is it like he coordinates it or something? Because I should point out that Government Code 61051 says the general manager shall be responsible for all the following, policy implementation, supervision of his staff, so forth, so on. C, the supervision of the district's facilities and services. And then there's a D, but my point is, so I just want to make sure he doesn't get into any trouble when you say put him on park maintenance or something.
I believe
Because-
that's language out of the current policy and procedure manual. I'll check that and make sure, but I believe I just was copying that directly.
Okay, well,
Will you promise to not make him resurface the tennis courts himself?
I mean, literally, he can't do that. He can't be responsible for overseeing things like that.
Right.
Yes, I am aware.
We agree. Okay, the next item is tree replacement and tree removal and replacement of trees that fell down on a triangular lot at Coventry and Arlington. Yes. Sure, yeah. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Cassandra Duggan. I am a almost 30-year homeowner in Kensington. And when I saw what had been done to this triangular lot across from downtown Kensington, I was extremely appalled. I have 25 trees on my property. I am an amateur arborist. I worked as a gardener for 2 years, doing a lot of arbory. I have an 18-foot extendable tree saw. I do most of my own work, but when I have to, I hire arborists, which I've done 5 or 6 times. Usually you want to get multiple bids, and you do have to supervise them closely. I have had people upon occasion try to talk the bid up. You get one bid, and recently I ended up paying twice as much. And what I'm concerned about here is when I did some research about Elite Tree on Yelp, 4 of their last 6 reviews give them 1 to 2 stars out of 5. 7 of their last 15 reviews give them 1 to 2 stars out of 5. When I Googled the closest 15 arborists, they were not in that group, and of those 15 arborists, I checked back 15 reviews on each of them, and all of them had at most 3 bad 1 to 2 star reviews in the last 15 reviews. So I'm concerned that Elite Tree is really not a great company to be working with. And what I'm understanding is that Eileen Natali had already hired them, or the board had hired them to work in the park. And normally, when there's an emergency like this, as I was told by Lynn Walter, who is the administrative aide, she is given the task of getting a couple of bids. However, instead, Tony Constantouris gave it over to Eileen Natali, and she just went straight with Elite Tree. And I'm wondering if there was any, supervision by another arborist company, any other bids. You need competition to keep the price down and to keep these people ethical. And I really sadly feel that the work that was done was not ethical. 1.5 trees were damaged. 1 tree hit another. The other tree was partly damaged. Some limbs needed removing. 5 trees got cut. This is like going to the doctor for 1 bad toe, and he cuts your leg off. And I just want to say, these things are treasures. They're historic. They give us oxygen, they give us shade, they lower your blood pressure. These were historic, beautiful trees. I'm a hiker. I walked under these trees at least 40 times. I want to say, whoever is put in charge of the trees that belong to the community here, please let it be someone who really loves and cares about trees. If you want me to volunteer, I'm happy to do that. I'm available weekdays, sometimes. I don't have a chainsaw, and I'm just concerned there was a conflict of interest. This guy had no incentive to keep the bid low. He knew he was hired, You know, he went crazy, took out 5 trees. Some of the reasons that were cited was that there was a tree that had multiple trunks, some of which were leaning towards the Arlington. Multiple trunks on a tree pose a danger because the trunks can sway differently during a storm. If we took out all the trees in Kensington that had multiple trunks, we'd probably have a quarter less trees. And there was a tree that was diseased. Well, there are many interventions you can do on a tree that's diseased without taking the whole tree out. And 5 trees are gone, and they're never coming back. I know Cyrus wants to replant some, you know, everybody wants to replant some trees, but I'm sorry, guys, that's just, you know, that is a pathetic replacement for, you know, historic, beautiful trees that were increasing all of our property values. I'm sure the people in that neighborhood are just appalled. You know, I'm sure their property values just went down by 10,000 each. And I just want to say, please, guys, this is your job. Please use more due diligence. Use the process. You know, always get multiple bids, make them compete, make them stick to their bids, check Yelp, check Better Business Bureau, no shortcuts, especially when an irreplaceable, valuable historic resource is at stake. Thank you.
Actually, something about that line of thought that really stopped me. It said this went to the administrator, it went to general manager, it went to you. That's what you said, that an email, yes. So who actually did the work? Like who was I assume that was staff that was overseeing this, right?
Well, this really was initiated by me. And I received a message from Jack Griffith, and he recommended that we look at these. There's 2 trees that fallen apparently, and there was a 3rd one that was diseased. So I knew that the board president had worked in the park with a company that we were satisfied with their work and was the low bidder in that process. So we're not tree experts. Apparently they sent out we're willing to send out an arborist to examine the trees. And Eileen volunteered to meet the arborists. And of course, the 2 that had fallen were not really a decision, and the one that was rotted wasn't a decision. And then there was some decision that had to be made about the ones with the hanging branches, and apparently there was also some disease also with that tree, as I understand it, at the base of the branches. So we were in phone communication about that. The arborist recommended that tree also. Eileen could correct me if I misstate something, because she was present during the process, volunteered her time. And we did have some residents come forward wanting to do a replanting of trees and had some ideas and wanting to replant with oak trees. And I believe Mr. Griffith and Bart Jones recommended 15-gallon oak trees. It's really important to have kind of a refurbishing program whenever trees are taken out, that new trees are put in. And they recommended these oak trees, and also recommended a temporary watering system to get them started. Apparently it takes a few years to get them going, established. Thank you. And so we were looking and doing that also, so that area can get back and be beautiful again.
My question is, was staff unable to do this? Because it seems, from a process perspective, that the general manager lets a board director know, who then goes and does it, which is opposite direction of the chain of command.
It kind of is opposite the chain of command. The board has pitched in to help on a lot of projects, and I had no one else to call on, and Eileen volunteered her help on this.
What do you mean you had no one else to call on? That's the part I don't get, because you have staff, at least 2 of them, who work most of the day.
I don't have staff.
Oh, you can go up.
I may have blinked, but I didn't see an opportunity to speak to the last agenda item, which was the, on the committees, the assignment of the committees. I didn't see an invitation to do that. For the record, the 3 committees that you spoke of, are they standing committees and are they subject to the Brown Act?
If they have 1 to 2 directors, they are not subject to the Brown Act, I believe.
I'm sorry to correct you, President Natoli. If they're established by an official board action, such as the board policies, then they are standing committees, even if they only have the 2 members. So yes.
Okay, I'm a little sensitive to ifs here.
I
If
believe
they are this or if they are that. I'm asking the yes or no question. Are these subject to the Brown Act or not?
President Natoli indicated that they were all specified in the policy manual. If that is the case, and I see no reason to doubt her, then yes, they are standing committees.
Because, as Director Natoli, I'm sure remembers, I was designated as a member of the Solid Waste Committee
Right.
by Rochelle.
Right.
You recall this, Rochelle? And I attended the first meeting, and I was pretty bluntly told by Director Natoli, who was in charge there, that they were not subject to the Brown Act. That I brought up the issue of notice being given for these meetings. I brought up the issue of minutes, and I brought up the issue of parliamentary procedure, all 3 of which were being violated quite blatantly at that meeting. And I was told by Director Natoli that she was not a process person, that she was an action person. And I was very angry and about this and felt very put down. And I never quite got it resolved in my mind. So I put you on the spot now. If I were to attend one of your Solid Waste Committee meetings again, which I probably will never be invited to, would we have minutes? Would we have proper notice within the proper notice period and the rest of what goes with the Brown Act?
I believe that I had given a 72-hour notice and it was published on the website. So maybe we have a different memory, but that was my memory, that they were. What you were commenting on was in the agenda for the meeting, I hadn't reserved a spot for public comments, and I apologize for that. I should have.
That is one thing I was, I'm interrupting. Did you finish? That was one thing I was commenting on.
Right.
The other thing was that there were no proper minutes that had been presented from prior activity.
I had done that, but also I had, and this is, I know, not a good excuse, but I had a new computer. I went from a PC to an Apple, and I had misplaced in the file where the minutes were. And I did do some minutes from my memory, but we had a meeting that was then several months earlier. And so I apologize for that I didn't do those meeting minutes.
All right, so let's accept
Yeah.
that, and let's hope that you don't give the impression that process is not important to you.
No, it is important. I was just very frustrated, Anthony, at that meeting because I had been trying to do my best and just felt that you had come on very strongly. But
I needed to. You came back strongly to me as well.
No, I went and got Len.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So to be clear, sorry, are you finished? I didn't mean to jump on you, Mr. Knight. To be clear, the standing committees are Brown Act subject, no matter, but the coordination is not. That's a different, thank you.
Under the current manual, it's done solely by the board president, so it does not need to be done at a public meeting.
Understood. Okay.
Actually, I'm very confused now. I thought the manual was something we could just are we pick and choosing how we use the manual? Because I had brought up this concern that the manual states we need to have committees publicly announced before the end of January. And you told me that was not a problem. Yet here we are talking about the manual having this power that locks in these things.
They're standing committees. the three.
No, we're just understanding terminology, whether or not.
I'm asking a question
whether
about the manual's utility in all of this.
Well, it's in process of being
The
reformed.
manual is largely out of date. Many sections were never even adopted. However, to the extent possible, I believe that the district follows those policies.
So how was the extent not possible to publish them before the end of January? Did you say we did not have a meeting? I thought we had no business in January. That's why we canceled everything.
As I recall, and the manual doesn't specify how I disclose the committees.
I don't believe it does.
And
That's where I think the difference in our recollection is because I don't think you have to.
It says publicly.
But she
Yes,
doesn't, no, she has to make the decision. I don't think she has to announce it publicly by that time. Also, I'm checking right now.
I think it was like section 4066 or something, or 62.
Yeah. Andrew, while we're doing this. We were talking
I'd like to come up and, my name is Andrew Reed.
tree removal and replacement.
Yes. And I'd like to sort of change the mood and say some happy things. I'd like to thank the district for its fast action when we had the emergency, when the tree fell at the top of Coventry, the lady referring to the trees a moment ago. My wife and I live a block away from that area. We walk our dog there probably once a day. And we were very impressed with how fast PG&E acted and the district acted to do their job in making it a safe area, cordoning it off. And I was very impressed, actually. Usually I might say some negative things about the district, but I really want to thank you all for doing a fast job. I'd like to make a further comment that, you know, I'm a tree hugger. I would defend trees, but I have to take exception to what this very nice lady said a few moments ago. I've watched those trees come apart slowly over the years. They voluntarily prune large branches. Several trees have already been taken down. Those trees are not typically native trees for our area, and they have been a hazard. And sometimes there's a silver lining. When the storm hits and a tree falls, thank God nobody was hurt. But frankly, the fact that those trees are all gone is terrific. I'm really excited about a fresh start. And I want to also point out that when that happened, several neighbors in the area got together and were saying, well, what's going on? What's going to happen? And John Herbst is a neighbor. John, raise your hand. Okay? And Lisa wasn't there, but Lisa knows everything in town. And so when I said, Lisa, you're the building person. What's going on? Do you have any knowledge? And I don't know, maybe I even called Lynn. I'm getting a little confused and addled in my old age. But somebody finally said, Lisa knows something. So I called Lisa and she said, I think Eileen is talking about doing something. So neighbors requested that Eileen meet, or somebody come down and meet with us. And thank you, Eileen, for coming down. John, you were there. Jack Griffith was there. And Jack Griffith is a landscape architect and a horticulturist. And it's one of these happy stories where the community volunteers meet with somebody from the staff and the board. And I think that, Eileen, the way this is evolving, and thank you in advance, General Manager, for getting on this. Replanting the 3 trees is a golden opportunity to have a really good start there. It may not be a big deal for us in the next 10 or 20 years, but putting live oaks there comports with our entire area here. Isn't there a neighborhood in Berkeley adjacent to us that is called something Oak? Live Oak, right? So I commend this proposal, and I hope to see it go through, and thank you again for the fast action.
I should also credit Phil Zimmerman, who mentioned throwing acorns on the site and letting the acorns take root.
Oh, yes, thanks for
Good
bringing
idea.
that up. That was, yeah.
Andrew Gutierrez, and is a biologist of roughly 60 years standing, with training in pathology and forestry, ecology. There's a lot of conflicts in terms of how people view trees and what the value is to them. How many of you know of anybody who has been killed by a falling tree in the East Bay? Marina supervisor was killed by a Monterey pine that toppled over, crushed him in his bed. There was a tree on 4th Street that every time we'd walk by, we'd say, that tree's about to go. It killed somebody. Now, when you look at the green hills of the East Bay, most of those species are not natives. They're invasive species. Monterey pine almost has no business being grown in the Berkeley Hills. And so when those trees get tall, shallow-rooted, windstorms come along and they're going to topple. In Blake Garden, they've taken out a couple that were leaning already. On San Luis Road, my friend had 5 trees that were about 50 feet tall. He took them out because they were disaster waiting to happen. Now, these trees are always going to be falling, and we don't know when and where. And so, while it's good to be a tree hugger, I'm an ecologist, and I'm still active in doing a lot of publications in ecology. The public good says that sometimes we have to take them out. The eucalyptus forests that some people treasure in the East Bay are fire hazards. And if those things start going up and start coming across over the hill, short paths aren't going to do a hell of a lot of good. So I appreciate that the trees were taken out in a timely manner. And I guess the question that we should be asking is, did the person do a competent job in terms of taking them out? And replacement of trees with native oaks, live oaks, is a good idea. So, there are a bunch of eucalyptus that surround a property in North Kensington or South El Cerrito, I don't know which one it is, and those trees are huge. And I just keep wondering when one of them's going to come down across a couple of properties. Okay? So, I would also like to make one last comment. We are retreating into the rancor of the last 20 years. The board is moving forward in a positive way, in a constructive way, and while they may not satisfy everybody, I do not think there are any hidden agendas. And to have questions raised up front in a provocative manner doesn't do credit to the person doing it, and it sure as hell doesn't allow us to move forward in a responsible manner to solve the problems of this dysfunctional burg. Thank you.
Lisa Corona, and I just want to also applaud the removal of the hazardous trees and the speedy planting of coast live oaks. I think in our community, in our public spaces, the park, the medians, there are a lot of very old trees. There has been almost no planting of new trees. And I think balancing the new trees so that things are not denuded dramatically the way that little lot took the hit, by us, kind of doing more management of the forest that we have and replanting particularly, I think that will help And then when you need to remove older trees, it won't be so startling as well. So thank you for moving so swiftly.
I just want to mention one thing too. That was a weekend of heavy storms and predicted very heavy winds. And I didn't notice the rot on the standing acacia, but I went back and read Jack's email, and he had in his email said that the standing acacia had rot. And somewhat amusingly, there was a man from Long Beach that was there the entire day waiting for that to come down because he makes guitars. And he wanted the blackwood acacia if he could get it. And when it came down, it was all rotted. No, it was all rotted. He couldn't. Yeah.
Celia Conkas. I just wanted to say that the trees that were on the lot were pittosporum and also blackwood acacia. And with all due respect to your experience with trees, I don't know of anybody who would consider the pittosporum and the blackwood acacia as historic trees. I know that I understand that completely, but let's not mischaracterize the trees. And we have heard that people with at least, good credentials have stated that those trees should come out. There is certainly an effort to plant native trees that are suitable for the area, meaning trees that don't need a lot of water once they get established, and that are appropriate for the area. And I think that planting the live oak would be a wonderful thing. They're very beautiful trees. They do lend themselves to be pruned in the event that a branch grows in the wrong place. But I really think it would be an asset to the community, and I applaud the people who have thought about it.
Thank you. And I have to say that when I would come from San Francisco, I would walk down that hill often, and it was nice to walk under that leafy canopy, and hopefully we'll have that in a couple of years. Lisa doesn't think it'll be a couple of years, but I'm hoping it'll be just a couple of years. Thanks.
Patula, I just have a comment. I think that we're getting two things confused. One is process, and the other is experts on trees. And so I think part of the commentary has been about the process we should be following when this kind of situation arises, getting proper bids, making sure we have contractors who are reliable, making sure the proper people are doing the work. The other is letting the experts that we hire make those decisions. So I don't think that people are being overly critical of you. I just want to separate that because I think your comments went to process. I think Cyrus's comments went to process. And the other issues are certainly important, that we had a quick response and that people feel that we may have done the right thing. So let's just not confuse the issues.
And I would say a big thanks. I was driving by that night frequently, and it was a night rather like tonight, and PG&E and the fire department were out there for hours and hours. I would say about 6 hours, removing those trees out of the roadway so that we could operate.
And then the fire department had to remove the tree that fell in the park, a Monterey pine, the next night. So, yeah.
Okay, so is this where we make a motion that we authorize the general manager to collect bids and move ahead with replanting of oak, I think it's live oaks?
We don't have bids.
I'm saying we authorize him to go ahead and get bids.
We don't need a motion.
Okay.
Yeah. So is there a motion to adjourn?
No.
Wait.
Oh, the copier.
No, also consent calendar. You have not consented to that.
And Madam President, I did promise on, it wouldn't be long before we got to item 10C, and I did not keep my promise to Mrs. Walters, so we should take that item up next.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do you want to address?
Yes, she'll present this item.
I didn't see you, Lynn, otherwise I would. Yeah. You do. And
Is she here as staff or on her own time, out of curiosity?
We don't discuss that at these meetings.
I mean, like, is she presenting as a citizen or as a staff report?
No, she's a member of the staff. She's presenting this, this is her item.
Okay. I guess we're sorry we're having staffs in the audience now.
Okay, so by way of background, before I came home to raise children, I spent 5 years in the leasing industry, not copiers, but capital equipment, things like intermodal containers, equipment for Pemex, Con Edison. So I'm familiar with the leasing industry. The first lease I negotiated for the district was 5 years ago, and I met with a number of contractors or vendors, and I knew enough to ask for the outright purchase price, a 3-year lease and a 5-year lease, and with that information I was able to determine what interest rate they were going to be making on our investment with them. And some of the percentages were as high as 17%. It was really egregious. And one company in particular, who had been our prior vendor, sent 2 big burly men to meet with little Mrs. Wolter and thought they would intimidate her into just accepting a renewal of their contract. And that was when I asked them the questions about interest rate that they got a little squirmy, and they left. And again, when I got their numbers, I understood why they wanted a 17% interest rate on their product. So fast forward, our 5-year contract with Smile, which has been very successful. The first contract we entered into with them saved the district about $5,000 over the 5-year term of the lease. Smile has the advantage of having a government contracts division, and we're able to take advantage of that arrangement, which enables us to enjoy a 2.23% interest rate for the product that we'll be leasing over a 60-month or 5-year term. The district has been making fewer and fewer copies over the last 5 years. The initial contract with Smile was for 5,000 black and white copies, 2,000 color copies. This was at a time when all the officers did not have their own printers, and many of the district's board packets were running well over 100 pages, and multiple copies were being requested. So the Smile vendor representative met with me. We talked about the number of copies we had been making recently and agreed that we didn't need more than 2,500 black and white pages, 1,400 color copies. And with that change and a number of other changes that are very minor, the overage per page charge is actually decreasing, but the overage per page charge for color copies would increase by 0.006 cents per page. The other change is that there is the option on Smile's part to increase the actual maintenance fee portion of the lease by up to 10% per year. I ran the numbers, and if we were to go with the next lowest proposal, this would still come in under that for the total 5-year term. Let's see, the new contract will end up saving the district $2,229 over the 5-year term, and so I'm Also pleased to announce that the Finance Committee reviewed this proposal at its meeting earlier this week. There was a motion, a second, and the motion passed unanimously. So on that, I'll take any questions.
I have one question. If it turns out that we start going over these limits, is it possible to get a new 5-year lease at that time?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it would be rare that we would go over. We also could take our work to a copy central place and have them do any unusual projects that look like they may put us over on a one-time period.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are those page numbers per year? 2,500 and 1,400? Oh, sorry, per month.
Oh, per month, yeah.
What is the cost difference in terms of outright purchasing? What's the disadvantage to making it?
The disadvantage of purchasing outright is you lose the cash. We're in a cash crunch situation always. We had yet another tree go down in the park last night with the high winds. It's somewhere between a 40 and 60-foot Monterey pine tree. As Eileen now knows, these are not inexpensive to remove. You know, there's so many demands that are made on the district. We want full coverage with our officers. We want...
So the only increase in cost is just that 2.2%. Otherwise, they're taking the purchase price and dividing it into 60
So
units.
the 2.2% is cheap money.
No, not arguing that. I'm just wondering if, you know, purchasing outright doesn't make the copier $17,000, does it? Or it's the monthly lease payment is the purchase price divided by 60. Is that?
Essentially, at
Okay,
2.2% cost of money.
No.
And then I also will add that the monthly lease payment includes the payment of the residual value of the existing copier.
Is there an advantage of leasing versus buying with respect to servicing? Do you get?
Probably not. And I have to say, I've been very pleased with the servicing we've received from Smile.
Right.
They've been prompt, they've been pleasant, they have always fixed what was wrong. We didn't have to call them back because it hadn't been fixed. And I will tell you that the officers have found the machine to be very user-friendly. When the officers are dealing with booking somebody and things are a little bit unpleasant and in a hurry, it's nice for them to be able to make copies of critical documents without having to fuss with the copier. And this would be a similar copier, similar features. I think the only decreased feature is we will get 50 pages per minute instead of 51.
Great.
So the old copier goes back to Smile, is that?
Yes, that's the other advantage, is that Smile will, included in this price is Smile takes away the old copier. One of the things that I've recommended to General Manager Constantouros is that we spend $600 in addition to this in order to buy a security kit, and that will wipe clean our hard
Right, you don't want to
drive.
get rid of the hard drive, yes.
It will be wiped clean, and the new copier will have its own built-in security kit because, of course, we have to be very sensitive with hard drive. It contains confidential information. We're a police department.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
I do have a question before it goes to public comment.
Yes.
Lynn, you said that they were going to be picking it up and taking it off. I'm looking
Yes.
now at page, I think it's 11. Not clear. It's the second to last page of the packet that I have, and it has client trade-in information. And under return, it says G and I. G would be they pick it up and take it back. I is we return it and are responsible for the cost. So it has to be one or the other. And I'm asking you now because I'd hate to have to make a change to the contract after the board approves it. So perhaps we could clarify that now, and then the board could approve the contract with the appropriate change.
My understanding for from the verbal meeting was that they would be taking it away. There was no discussion of additional cost.
Okay, then this page is going to need to be changed before it's actually signed.
Okay, so which page again?
Well, the pages aren't actually, oh, 7, sorry.
Page 7.
It's under client trade-in information. There's that table, and if you look at the far right box under return, it has P and I. And the two are incompatible. Under return, they're spelled out under return options. Yeah, the problem is it has both letters, and it can't be, they can't be
Lynn, it's
both
in the
true.
table
I see it.
on the far right.
I get it. I get it. So so do you want to, how do you want to proceed?
Well, I think that I should be deleted, which means that they would have to initial that change. And the board, of course, would approve the contract with that change.
So I'll ask, I just want to clarify, I'm asking Smile to initial
That's correct.
removing I, and upon that occurring, then we're good to go.
Right, and well, Tony would have to initial it too, whenever there's a modification like that to a contract.
Actually, so I'm just wondering, the Elite Tree contract, it also, the real version, which is not the PDF or stuff, it has the double initialing too, right?
I believe that the one that was actually signed only had the final number. I'm not sure why you ended up with the one that had both, but if it had both, then we can get it initialed.
Okay. I know how to proceed. I'll make that call tomorrow, and thank you very much.
To make a motion.
We'll give it, Pat's had a couple, yeah.
I was just curious, in terms of saving money, this is Pat Gillette again, does the fire department share the copy? Do they have their own copier?
They have their own they have their own copier, I believe, for confidentiality.
And so is there no way that the two can be shared, or the cost can be shared?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Am I excused?
Can I make a motion? I'll make it. Okay.
I guess we should thank her for doing the research and thank everyone
I'm going to
else
make a
involved.
motion that we approve the proposed lease and terms for the 5-year contract with Smile for a total of $21,550.20 to be billed monthly,
I'll second that motion.
with the caveat that the change occurs on page 7 and that the return is picked up by Smile.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lynn, and sorry, I didn't see you hiding behind Peter. So, sorry.
So last item is the consent calendar.
Yes.
Would it be okay if the administrator stayed for this item? Because I actually want to pull it, and I had some questions. Could that be, does that need to be recorded that he said yes?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So, first off, minutes are minutes. Obvious issue is, again, this is not noting who made the minutes. This is, again, I assume, our Go transcription service thing that the district is using.
Oh, so the draft, okay.
Yeah. And that, I actually had a question about that. I went and looked at the Go transcription website a bit, and I was kind of curious, about their costing and stuff. And they don't seem to offer summary minutes. They only offer verbatim transcripts. So I'm wondering how what we give to them turns up in this form, and why they're using terms like we had one on traffic, one on solid waste, at least 2 or 3 on the police services. Because that's first person. That is not like they had. And these are not verbatim minutes either. So I guess the obvious question becomes, what are we actually buying? And I'd inquired, as part of preparing for this board meeting, because I figure, consent calendar, especially the minutes, are the most important part of our government, because this is what lasts, through the decades. I want to actually see what the transcripts were, and I could not, no one would actually have them available or said they were not at the district offices. I used, what was it? I believe that is Section 4A of the general manager contract that allows me to inquire with the staff. So I'd inquired about if these did present, and I was told they do not, and I'm sort of confused now.
Well, the recording is the,
But I'm saying this is going through a transcription service, right? Into a physical form that becomes the minutes. That's what the whole point of this was, right?
with slight alterations, because of course they wouldn't have the board directors there listed.
But how is it slight alterations when it goes from verbatim to summary minutes?
I did that, Cyrus. Going through, I listened to the audio and tried to make it a little bit more cogent and summary.
So are you saying that a district director, one of the people who these minutes represent in the future, is actually writing the minutes, which portray them? There's no one, I'm just kind of curious, anyone for transparency or good government see how that is an awfully big conflict of interest, that the people who being immortalized are the same people writing about themselves?
Well, the staff member previously also is part of the minutes and the record, whoever is taking them. And the fact is that, just a moment, please, don't interrupt me. The fact is that these minutes always come before the public and all the board, and they are in draft form. You'll see their draft. So often, sometimes they come multiple times, and you are welcome, absolutely welcome, to bring up discrepancies or problems or difficulties based on the audio and the meeting record.
Well, actually, I had another question, because on those other ones, you stamped them as Go Transcription made it, so implying the minutes are the product of the company you hired, but if you're telling me that they're being edited afterwards...
we put Go Transcript because it was asked who did the start of the transcription. I mean, it would be apparent, I think, to everyone that the board directors would not be listing, or the date of the meeting necessarily wouldn't be the draft form. I mean, that's formatting.
I didn't know who was writing these until I just heard that a board director is writing them.
No, the board director is not writing them. The board director is preparing them, formatting, word processing, in terms of final word processing, as we do. We word process all kinds of documents for the agenda. That's what board directors... Well, if anyone had any concerns, they are always welcome to come. We've had minutes based on Go Transcription for 6 or 7 months at least, if not a year, and folks have not come forward to complain. So if they've had a complaint about what they said not being accurately represented, as we had, I mean, we've had that before. So if folks come forward and take umbrage with what they said not being accurately reflected, they're absolutely welcome to do that. We changed the minutes to the best we can.
We?
The board.
Few minutes.
I mean, I'm just sort of confused. So this goes back to the policy and procedure manual. Again, we're saying we pick and choose how we're using it because it does say the district staff produces the minutes. And so now we're saying this thing about the standing committees are empowered by the policy procedure manual, and we do things that are potentially, we just do what we still can, even though it's an old document, yet why is it we are doing this thing which clearly represents a serious conflict of interest in the, in the view of good governance? That you're having, does no one not find it odd or concerning that the people who represent you are then writing how they represent themselves? We're not legally required to keep the video and audio. The minutes are literally the immortalized remains of what people remember.
And Mr. Gutierrez, we need to follow the proper process. We have 10 minutes left before we would have to extend the meeting, so I'll let Director Natoli.
Yeah,
I just have a quick comment. As someone who's sat on a lot of boards, very often, Cyrus, there will be someone on the board who takes the minutes, but the difference here And I think what you're highlighting is that you know exactly who wrote the minutes. So if you're having the minutes transcribed by a service, and then someone is word processing them, which I call editing, unless they're taking the minutes from the transcription and making paragraphs or adding periods or something, that's word processing. Editing is restating what the transcript actually says and summarizing, which is what these minutes appear to be doing. So I think in the interest of transparency and good government, and all you have to go do is look at how corporate boards run or even nonprofit boards run to know this. So if any of you have that kind of experience, perhaps you can call on it, or perhaps our general manager can help here. What we should be doing is at least identifying who is responsible for editing, which is what I think is going on, the minutes. And that will address your problem, Cyrus, I think, so that we are clear as to who the author is and if they're in any way shading the facts.
Thank you.
Just very quickly want to say that when Len Schwartzberg was alive, there were multiple occasions in which he objected to the way the minutes were prepared and claimed that there were omissions or inaccuracies in the way the minutes were prepared. And so it is not suddenly a unique problem. It is the person who is writing them in some way or transcribing. There is always some kind of nuance that's put in.
Oh, yes, I'm definitely agreeing with you that,
I believe we have 1 minute before 10 o'clock.
Can we just adopt?
Well, oh.
9:53 for the record.
Sorry.
I suggest that we table the minutes
Can we just adopt them?
I think the minutes can be approved. I think there's suggestions on how they can be,
But we are having the actual transcriptions that the service is generating in-house at the district, correct?
I'm sorry?
That the actual transcripts that are used to generate these minutes go directly to the district offices, correct? I'm asking
We are
a
having
question.
discussion about what the general manager wants the procedure to be. It's actually up to the general manager, it's not up to the board.
So what have you authorized?
So we're under
It's in the-
discussion with the
Well,
lawyer.
we've had a process where the transcription service has done the minutes, and there's some proofing. There's no changes to the wording, it's just proofing.
I'm asking where they're going.
I think I'm going to ask General Manager Constantouras to work on that and come.
And there's been some good suggestions, I thought, for improving them too tonight.
Yes, and come back with a suggestion.
But I think we should proceed with the minutes and probably,
I move that we adopt the consent calendar, which includes the minutes of the January 10th board meeting.
Can I just say something quickly? Seems to me, if you're going to use a full transcription, you would have to have the full transcriptions approved as official minutes. So whichever you end up, that's what it gets approved and saved for posterity. There's always the recording.
There's a motion on the floor. I've made a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I vote no, and you know my reasons.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so that was 4-1. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will motion or move to adjourn the meeting.
Second that motion?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.